I would like to welcome to the stage Sam McCarthy, writer-director Melissa Miller-Costanzo, Brian Darcy-James, and Molly Ringwald. Thanks. Glad you guys enjoyed it. I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about the genesis of the whole concept, Melissa. And did you always envision this when you started writing the script as something that was going to be more central around the characters than necessarily twists and turns and plot points?
I don't know if I could write a movie with like specific plot points, to be honest. But this was just a lot of things that was mulling about in my head. And it just came from a need of trying to figure out stuff, I think, in my own life. And not only that, but reflecting on things as a kid when I was growing up and just things that have really just kind of stuck with me that I feel like I needed to just finally kind of get out, you know.
And for those of you who don't know, this was Melissa's first feature script and feature directorial debut. And it's such an accomplished film, and I was just curious what some of the biggest learning curves were for you in the writing process and directing.
I mean, I think strangely enough, from a directing perspective, I would say to filmmakers, and I know this kind of seems to come out of left field, but I think know what your opening credit sequence is going to look like. I think I'm talking to a lot of actors, but you might also be directors. Just know what your opening sequence is and get enough B-roll to have that space in the edit room, because you're going to need a lot of Band-Aids. You're going to need to cut away, and you should have that B-roll. So I think, to me, just making sure you get enough B-roll to have options in the edit room, I think.
And then Molly and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you guys didn't audition, but you were having conversations with the producers, with Melissa. What were some of those early things that were important for you to know about the project, and what was it that made you trust Melissa as a first-time director?
I think what was most important for me, I've played my share of moms. I feel like I sort of went from playing a teenager to playing a mom. It was like, boom. But playing a mom makes a lot of sense to me, and it's a job that I really like a lot, and I find really complex and intriguing and difficult and challenging. But usually, very often, moms are portrayed just as very secondary to a man, a husband, a boyfriend, a son. And it was really important to me that she had her own story, and that she was an important character in her own right, and that she was complex. And I liked the script. I felt like that was there, and I just wanted to make sure that was Melissa's intention as well. And she came to see me in a play at the time, and we went out to that restaurant that I can't remember the name of.
The bar room.
Yeah, the bar room. Yes,
because I had to look it up today.
Yes, and I just got a really great feeling from her that that's what she wanted to do, and I just sort of went with my gut, which is usually how I do stuff. And then Brian, we all also met in the bar room, and a lot happened in the bar room. And
it's a really good place. They have really good, like, what are the fries that I really like?
You really liked the truffle fries. Yeah. Yeah, so that's really kind of how it happened. And it was a really fast shoot. I mean, it was really cold, as you can probably tell. And I felt like everybody really wanted to be there. It wasn't the cushiest dressing room. Well, there was no dressing room, actually, right? But I felt like everybody really was passionate about what they were doing and really wanted to bring it. So it was a good experience.
How about for you, Brian?
I liked the script was the first thing. It was such a unique. I remember distinctly having questions about the way that it would go in between these monologues for Carla and Tom, and just trying to figure out as that was unrolling and revealing itself that this is a very interesting contrast, between these kind of almost poetic declarations of confusion or love, or just trying to find one's place in the midst of a very, and I mean this as a compliment, a very messy display of characters, and each component of the family, I was really impressed with how complex it was, and how each little part of the family had its own kind of own little teapots spinning in their own ways. So the long way of saying the script was very compelling to me and very unique, and then knowing that Molly was going to do it was a huge magnet for me, because I was a fan of Molly, just having a familiarity with her, early work, but also I was really interested in the idea of Molly Ringwald playing this particular character. So there's that. Oh, that's an interesting, unexpected, kind of a version of that actor, which I was really thought that's a brilliant idea. And so those two things, and then of course the fries was the
The truffle fries.
was the final tipping
I was like,
point.
keep them coming.
And then you guys had a really short rehearsal period before starting the film. What were some of the things that you hoped to get out of that limited time together, since it was so short?
I mean, the rehearsal period was the dinner that the three of us had. I mean, there was no rehearsal period. I think the boys got to spend some time together, and I think Brendan and Jemima got to spend some time together. But, I mean, these guys didn't get to rehearse at all. We had conversations, and there were some emails.
Were you in the conference room?
We did a read-through.
Did we?
We did.
We did.
Yeah, I was
At the
thinking
studio,
that,
at the
yeah.
production offices.
We did?
Yeah, we had
did.
scene work. We actually did scene work.
Yes, we did.
Oh, we had a lot of rehearsal period. It was really fruitful.
Yeah.
Don't remember that.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the shooting conditions, because you just mentioned how cold it was. You guys filmed this right after a blizzard, and I believe Jemima's first day was some sort of blizzard on the rooftop when she was shooting that scene with Brendan. How was that? I mean, you can literally see the snow in the background of numerous scenes as well. So was that a distraction at any point? How did you power through just being freezing cold on set every day?
We didn't set out to make a winter movie. I had always envisioned it in the fall and, foliage, and it's like kind of crisp and you can wear a blazer. But that's not what we were handed. So, but I think ultimately it looks beautiful, and it's a winter movie, and what a surprise. But, we had to make some concessions, and I had to add certain things to dialogue on the fly. And, there's some, visual effects we had to add. And it was funny, though, because we had some early test screenings. We were all kind of like, oh, my God, the continuity of this movie is all over the place. It's sunny, it's pouring rain, it's snow. Like, this sucks. And we would have these test screenings, and we'd be like, did the changing of seasons, like the changing of weather distract you? And everyone was like, what change in season? And I think it's a testament to the actors, and it's a testament to the story that people were so taken by the story that, like, they didn't realize it was like a complete downpour, and then there was sun. And so, we had to work very hard to try to,
Doesn't that happen in life, though?
Yes. I mean, I think it happened like way more than it's supposed to in this film. But, again, like, it's New York, things happen, and
that scene where it rains on Howie,
Yes.
that was, of course, an accident, right? I mean, we didn't have the budget
No, I
to
mean,
do
of course,
a downpour like
right.
that, and it was so perfect.
It was perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
a
And I
happy
think
accident.
that specific day we were supposed to shoot that. There was some sort of schedule situation where we were supposed to shoot the park first, and then we couldn't because, like, Jemima might have missed her flight. But we had to switch the schedule, and then it ended up being perfect because we did get that rain for Howie, and we got sun for the park. And so these things kind of sometimes, like, these happy accidents do happen.
No, it's amazing. And talking about how the film looks as well, the interiors, and you have such an extensive background working in art departments. What do you feel like that gave you that was an advantage as a director?
I think if anything, there's just, you look at things with a keen eye, maybe more so than someone who doesn't have that background. So certain things they just mean more to me. And I think specifically just being able to have these contacts and these vendors in the art department. There was a scene, Brian's scene, where the kids, he tries to impress them with this back alley restaurant that doesn't exactly work out. I had always wanted to block it with a dumpster. And on the day, it just was kind of like, well, what's going on? Did you get the dumpster? And it was like, oh, I didn't get the dumpster. But I was like, I'll call my dumpster guy. And I was like, Anthony.
You have a dumpster guy?
I have a dumpster guy. Avid Waste. Shout out to Anthony. But I was like, Anthony, I need a dumpster. And he was like, go to Steiner, have your truck pick up a dumpster at Steiner. You could totally borrow it and then just return it. And this was at 6 a.m. when I was supposed to shoot in an hour. So like those are the type of circumstances where it really did come in handy. And I mean, I don't know what I would like. That shot is like the dumpster is instrumental, you know. So Avid Waste is a good company.
I think it's huge. I mean, just as somebody who watches movies, my daughter is a big cinephile, but she will not watch stuff with me because everything bugs me. And usually what bugs me a lot is the art direction. The art direction and the wardrobe department if they don't age things well.
Oh, yeah.
Or if the house doesn't look like it's been really lived in by this family, if it looks like it, you know, it just generic, or when you can obviously tell that they're moving cartons around that you can't see what it is, or you know, things like that. It just brings me right out of the scene, and I think that this movie has a great authenticity to it.
Probably know this as well. I mean, the scenics do a lot of aging. I mean, things just come that way, and I think you need to take the time to like not only like the location, but like all the props. Like the props department spends all their time sending their stuff to the scenic department to age, so it does have that lived-in look, and I think that is really important.
One of the things that I think you do so beautifully with the story is that no matter how much time on screen a character has, they have such a backstory and they feel so fully dimensional. And I'm curious for the three of you, how much of the other characters' backstory were you interested in knowing about? Does that help you with your performance at all when you're in scenes together?
Well, I mean, in a way, no, because you have an insular world in which you're living, and fires in your immediate backyard that you're trying to put out with your family, with your sons, with your wife, with your lover.
Felicity Kavanaugh.
Felicity Kavanaugh.
My nemesis.
No, so I mean, to some extent, it's obviously it's good to have a kind of a bird's eye view of what's going on, but succinctly, not so much. Just kind of what's in your own little bailiwick.
I think everybody has a different process for that, and some people like to know everything, and I always sort of get a feeling of how other people like to work, because I don't always want to impose my way onto other people. You know, there's nothing worse than somebody who just forces you into their process when it's not your process. So I just try to make things make sense for me and know as much as I can. And if you're sitting with somebody and you feel like they want to talk about it and you want to talk about it, then you have that conversation. Otherwise, I just try to make sure that things make sense to me, and I go to the writer, and in this case, the writer-director, and ask questions about things that I don't understand.
Yeah. We had a very open dialogue with Melissa, Molly, and I. You know, there's a lot of things to fill in. There's a lot of terrain that you have to know how it was traveled, when it was traveled, what effect it's had, you know, and so those conversations, of course, did exist, which are really helpful. But you know, knowing much about Jemima's character and Brendan's character, it's not really my knowledge. That's his journey. So just to draw a line between those two kinds of characters.
Yeah, because we don't know what's going on in the movie. I mean, our characters don't know.
And then Sam, I'm interested for you. You had the great pleasure of Brian and Molly playing your parents, and obviously they've got such extensive background in theatre, film, television. What were some of the things that you really took away from the experience of working with them and learned as a performer?
A lot, actually, because this was my first film, and it would be really hard for me to tell you this is what I really picked up, because when you're so kind of new to something, you just absorb so much information. You're just kind of like a sponge for just knowledge and stuff. So there would just be behavioral things and whatever. And I don't know, I couldn't really tell you, but so many things I really learned from this. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the relationship between Howie and Odessa, Melissa, because I think it's played out really delicately in a way that you understand his infatuation. It could cross a line and feel very uncomfortable to watch, but you managed to dance that line really well. And I was curious about the process of figuring out how far you were going to take that relationship emotionally and physically with them.
I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with the edit actually, surprisingly enough. I mean, there was a lot of times where we would be working on a cut and we'd be like, he kind of seems like he's stalking her. So we had that was a fine line, and we had to massage that a lot and make sure that it felt sweet rather than creepy. And I also think, but it's okay for it to feel creepy a little bit. And I also think, like, ultimately when you learn sort of about Odessa's background and you understand why she's even paying attention to this person in the first place, I think that sort of satisfies the question of why are these two people attracted to each other. But even casting the Howie role was really difficult for me because I needed to find someone who could carry that vulnerability, but also, like, I mean, Jemima Kirk's beautiful and she's a woman, and it's kind of like I needed the audience to believe that she would even turn her head to this person, regardless of, like, yeah, she was kind of broken, and so that part of it had to do with it. But I think so that's why Brendan brought a lot of that to it. Like, I kind of said to him, like, you're vulnerable, like, you're kind of cocky, like, you kind of, like, go for her. So, you know, that was a really interesting duality that he just handled really well, and we were always cognizant of it, and we were always, you know, talking about that relationship.
I also wonder if you could talk a little bit about the thread with Harley Quinn Smith as Lindsay and her storyline. Is that something where people have suddenly felt like that's a much more timely storyline than when you even first mapped it out on the page?
Yeah, I have to say, someone interviewed me and they were like, Kavanaugh? I'm like, dude, I wrote this in like 2011. You know what I mean? And I actually went to school with someone named Kenny Kavanaugh, and that's kind of where the Felicity Kavanaugh thing comes from. And he was the one who spread the rumor about me in high school because he had just moved to town and thought that it would be cool to make fun of somebody and maybe that would gain him friends. So, like, a lot of these things in this movie are very true, you know? But I think that the Harley character, like, the Lindsay character, Harley brought so much to it. And I think when I wrote it, it maybe didn't have, like, such the weight that she brought to it. And she just brought so much to it that it all of a sudden became this very serious thing that happened to this girl. And I have to say the intention when I wrote it wasn't that deep. And she just brought this thing. And then, of course, like, you know, we shot it in 2017 and then the Me Too thing came out. And so, like, time-wise, of course, we can attribute it to that. But, you know, it did happen before it and it was written before it. But yes, of course, you see it with different eyes because of the climate that we're in now.
Which is interesting because I think that's happened with a lot of films. I wanted to pivot a little bit back with you, Molly and Brian, about your characters and the scenes where they're in therapy. I thought those were a really interesting backdrop that give us these things that we wouldn't necessarily know about their inner thoughts through the other scenes. And it's also really interesting to watch the way that it's filmed in such extreme close-up. Were those the only takes that you guys did?
I think I just did it twice, right? That's what I remember, doing it twice.
I don't think we did it many times.
Yeah,
no, yeah.
I think it was twice. I mean, it was a hard thing to do. You know, having the camera so close, and also just looking directly in the camera. You know, you spend so much time making movies trying not to look in the camera, trying not to let your eye, like, forgetting it's there, and then doing that, you know, looking right in the lens, I think was really, really difficult. It was like looking somebody in the eye, or, you know, like really, really in the eye. But I think it's very effective in the movie.
The scene where we are on the couch together, when you're not in that perspective, I thought was hard to do as well. And a lot of it, again, is the writing, because there's not much resolution there. It's just people trying to figure out where they're standing in this world and how they're relating to this other person that they've been, you know, at one time they were madly in love with, and now not so much. And is there all of those questions that came up and were unresolved in that scene? I really enjoyed that aspect of the writing in that scene.
Because it's a story that resonates so much, because the characters feel very real, very fleshed out, it seems to be a film that, at least as I've seen audiences begin responding to it from its premiere at Tribeca a few months ago, it feels like a film that makes people come up and tell you guys stories about themselves as well. So I'm just curious what some of the responses have been, or what some of the stories are that people have come up that have really resonated with you.
For me, people very often say something about the bread scene. They feel like they've been in that scene or they've heard that scene. I mean, you know, one of the great ways to hear a scene like that is to go out to a restaurant on Valentine's Day. You hear people breaking up all the time. You know, it's like so much pressure. They're trying to get together. They're trying to make it romantic, and it's just awful, you know. And yeah, so that's what people have told me.
I had a really great one after a screening at Mill Valley. This guy comes up to me, and he hands me his hat, and it has a bird on it. And he was like, that grebes, like what you were talking about, the grebes was like I know about those birds. And he was like a bird conservatory guy. And like, that's what really like hit home to him. And I was just like, okay.
There's something for everyone.
Exactly. So like, that was awesome for me. And I was like,
are you sure it wasn't Jonathan Franzen?
No, I wish it was Jonathan Franzen, but this guy was like a real like in the field bird guy.
Jonathan Franzen does that.
Does he really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
He's
read
serious.
that book. I really like it. Okay.
I got a nice compliment from what I'm pretty sure was someone who was a closet hoarder, who said the receipt thing. I'm like, I didn't know what they were talking about. I couldn't remember. Oh right, the receipt thing. Yeah, I get you. I get it.
How about you, Sam? Have you had any interesting audience responses?
I can't say I have. I'm kind of feeling a little jealous now that I haven't because.
So if everyone could go up to Sam after and tell them some
stories. The taking of the toothbrush, you know, when you're in a house with other kids, it drives me crazy. They each have their toothbrush. There's a place for each of them, but inevitably one of them takes the other's toothbrush. Drives me nuts.
I mean, I will say, I think that people have come up to me and been like, you know, the Simon character just says, you know, what we all want to say. And so in that regard, like he says the things we're all too afraid to say, I think.
One of the things I really enjoyed learning about the development of this project as well was with you, Melissa, and through your work in our department and showing the script when you were going for a writer's assistant job, that led to some amazing mentorship, which helped you to get here. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how that really helped you get the film made.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty incredible, and I do like to talk about it as much as I can because these two women could have easily just ignored me and like moved on, and they didn't, and that has been so meaningful to me. I mean, I was working in the art department in the first season of The Affair, and I was working like right next to the writer's room, and so I just, you know, would like drop a pencil and just like bump into their door and just like any excuse I could get into that office and talk to these people. And then my husband, Russell, who's here, he was like, well, why don't you just like approach the showrunner? And I was like, that's insane. I can't do that. And then I was like, well, I guess maybe I can. And so I approached Sarah Treem and I just said, hey, like, is there any way that you would consider me to be the writer's assistant for the second season? And she was like, I mean, send me your writing sample and, you know, we'll go from there. And so I actually I had some downtime on the job. So I wrote a spec of The Affair. And she was like, well, I can't read that for legal reasons, but do you have anything else? And so I said, yes, I do. And so I kind of like, you know, brushed the dust off of this thing and I sent it to her and it got me a meeting. And it was, you know, I had a meeting with Sarah Treem and Anya Epstein, who was the head writer at the time. And, you know, it was so nerve-wracking. I remember it was at like the Bowery Hotel and I went in and I bought like a new shirt from like APC. And I walked in and they were like, can you give us a moment? I was like, oh my God, okay, of course. And so I like walked around the block and I came back in and I was very nervous and we sat down and we ended up having a wonderful conversation. And they were like, dude, like, you're too good to get us sandwiches. Like, this script is wonderful. And they were like, you know, are you happy with your, you know, present representation? And I was like, I don't know fucking representation. What are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. They don't really call me back as much as I'd like. And so, you know, Sarah was like, oh, well, I'll send you. We just got like I'm talking too much. So anyway, so Sarah sent like the script to her agent and Anya was like, ooh, let's get a bidding war happening. And then of course, like, you know, when their agents were like, sure, we'll look at it. And I immediately sent a script, like a email being like, I'm taking meetings in LA. And they were like, oh my God, you must be important. And so they sat down with me and like one agency was like, we know you're sitting down with William Morris. And so it became this thing. And then from there I got signed and I, you know, the script started getting send it out. And like from there it was really a fast process. But I just appreciate them so much because they could have easily not done that.
Yeah, I think it's an industry where there's as many people working to try and help you and lift you up as there are against you sometimes. And I'm curious if the rest of you have had any experiences where there's been mentorship that has really helped to shape your career, or on the flip side, if there's something that you've tried to do for other people in paying it forward.
The thing that comes to mind immediately for me is Tom McCarthy and Spotlight, and how they had already cast Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, and Rachel McAdams, and they're filling this fourth spot of Matt Carroll, and he cast me, and you know, it became apparent afterwards that that was not an easy sell. And in fact, everyone that was in charge of making these decisions were saying, we don't know who that is, and so why don't you get someone like the other three, recognition-wise? And he said, no, that's the guy I want to do this. So that changed my life. I mean, and so that was it was a huge moment of someone just actually believing in something that they wanted, and then also saying, I believe that you can do it, and so go ahead, get in the pool. So that I'll never forget. I'll pass your applause on to Tom.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience, and I wanted to start by asking you guys, what is your first step in your process of developing your character when you read a script?
My first first step in the process is just if I like the material overall. You know, not just my character, but just if I like the whole thing. And then if the character makes sense, if there's something challenging about it, if I haven't hopefully done it before, those are all questions that I ask myself. If it speaks to me in some way in a just sort of a visceral way. And then, and then go from there. And then there's so many other elements, who's doing it. Because, film is such a collaborative process. You can't just, as an actor, you can't just act in a vacuum and, you'll go crazy. That's why so many actors are crazy, I think. Because, they depend on other people to let them do it, There's just so much involved. And that's one of the wonderful things about it, too, is you get to collaborate with all these people. But, it's a process.
I feel compelled to tell a really kind of weird story that Melissa knows, and
Do it.
Everything that Molly said is true in terms of my approach. It's pretty work-a-day, pretty meat and potatoes. But I have a tendency to listen to my dreams and use my dreams as kind of like a journal for colors or strange things that pop out real quickly. I go through phases where I keep pretty detailed journals of my dreams, and this is a true story. About 2 days before I received this script, I had this dream, very specific dream about meeting Paul
Newman.
Paul Newman, sorry. I was going to say Paul Simon. That didn't seem right.
I would love to meet Paul Simon.
In my dream, I'm meeting a young Paul Newman who's walking off a set, and he's on this movie, no one knows who he is, and he's really discouraged, and we're walking down the street, and he goes, I don't know, this isn't working out. I said, Paul Newman, you don't understand. You have such a life in front of you. You're going to be a huge movie star. You're going to drive race cars. You're going to sell popcorn. You're going to change the world. And he was like, all right, well, whatever. And it was my thing. It was my thing. Like, you're Paul Newman before you're Paul Newman. Then I get this script and I read this thing, and then Howie's like, I'm going to give this postcard to this woman that I'm infatuated with about Paul Newman, because it's like Paul Newman before he's Paul Newman. I was like, oh my God, that is so weird.
And then I was like, under your bed.
That was the weirdest part. No, but when I met Melissa, I stopped in at Barnes and Nobles and I found that postcard, and I said, Melissa, I have to share this with you because I have to do this. I have to do this. I mean, that was one reason out of many why I wanted to. But long way of saying that I do try to kind of incorporate the things that are working on my subconscious. If I can find a way to put them in my performance or my characterization, I will.
Sam.
Well, I can't really say that I've worked enough to be able to say, I don't think I want to do this. But but what I definitely since I'm a person, would have an opinion on things when I look at it or read it or whatever. And yeah, one thing that I really liked about this film, which is a different thing, is I really liked that the characters were people. And I felt that, I don't know, a lot of movies you see a lot of characters and people representing ideas, which is also good too, and you see people representing ideas in this movie too, but I feel like a lot of it was actually just real people, and you've seen, like, and I've met people, like people I've seen in this movie, and yeah, and so, I mean, that was my impression when I read it, but I don't, at the moment, have a method of determining whether...
And then just very quickly, because, Molly, you mentioned people that you work with. When you're working with a director that has an established history of filmmaking, not as a diss at all, this is amazing. I was just curious, how much of a deep dive do you tend to do? Do you tend to ask other actors that have worked with that director about them, about the producers? Because it is so important to have that safe, trusting environment on set for everybody to get the best work.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
It's really like, how much research are you doing on a director? If you know people that have worked with them, are you going around and asking them? And how much are you finding out
I mean,
about
you
the
try to find out as much as you can, but, you know, in a situation like this, it's really a leap of faith because Melissa didn't have her work as a director, and she just had her word and her intentions and her, you know, the way that we communicated, and I just went with that. You know, and I have to say, it was the same thing with John Hughes. 16 Candles was his first movie. And like this one, I was cast on a meeting. I didn't audition for it. We both sort of took a leap of faith with each other, and that turned out okay. So I have a pretty good experience with that. I really like working with first-time directors. Yeah. If it ends up like this, you know, I mean, I think Melissa is really a perfect example because she was really passionate. She knew what she was doing. She had a real opinion and a focus, but she was also collaborative, and was able to sort of, you know, take our opinions and our questions and sort of incorporate everything, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, it really shows on screen. And we have a question from Sasha, who was asking, given the current coverage and climate on sexually inappropriate behavior and misconduct allegations, how do you think this movie will be received with audiences, and will it provide support for further open dialogues and conversations?
I mean, I think Molly and I have had this conversation that the Lindsay character kind of like accepts what happened to her and owns it. And I think that's a very modern way of thinking. And I think maybe before all of this came so much in the forefront, people were like really burying it. Burying? Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah. But I think, again, it's like you were saying, like sometimes these things just kind of like hit the zeitgeist in an interesting way. And, you know, we shot this before it became a movement, but I do think, again, like when you watch this movie, you're looking at with those eyes, and I think you're thankful for Harley for giving a voice to it.
But also, I think there's something interesting about seeing the relationship with Odessa and Howie, because how many times have we seen that in reverse? And, you know, I've seen that. I've been through that a bunch of times. And it was interesting to see that it can happen the other way around, and that you can find yourself in a moment like that and catch yourself, too. She catches herself and stops. And that's important to realize that we do have those feelings, and that can happen, but that you stop yourself and just say, like, okay, slow down. You know, this is a kid.
I really want to congratulate you guys on such a beautifully intrinsic film with such amazing characters. I hope that you guys will tell everyone that the film is out in theaters this Friday. Please spread the word, and thank you again for sharing it with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.